Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirmasiri Saraswati Paskatave Satana Panchakalpa Jivashchaki Pasideva Tapati Tanapamani So everybody remembers what we talked about so far? We talked about the prosperity types. I think you've been to my lectures on this before, last year, right? Was that in Sweden? Where was it? It was here, or just the summary? Yeah, okay. So we talked about the 6 prosperity types, and we talked about the definition of the 4 fields, and then we talked about the temperament of the people who belong in the 4 fields. And as reference, you have this flip chart, which is kind of a little summary of the temperament of the people who belong in each of the 4 fields. Now, that again is most people's primary interest. You know, what's my nature? Where do I fit? But we do have other principles which, if you don't follow them, you're not going to really achieve full satisfaction and purpose in your work. So this one is part of principle 4, having ethical and meaningful work of value, that our work should be honest and it should be valuable. And it might perhaps be surprising that one way that our work is ethical or not ethical is, are we working in our right field? You know, we may think that whether or not I'm working in the right place is just my personal business. And maybe I'm not going to be as happy as I could have been otherwise, but that's it. But actually, it's far more, how would we say, impactful on the world whether or not we're in the right place. And we know that because Krishna has these 2 verses on this topic. They're practically identical in 335 and in 1847. You notice it has the same first 2 lines. Shreyan Swadharma Viguna Paradhamaswanustitat, and you see exactly the same first 2 lines. And here Krishna uses the word bhayavaha, which we'll get into in a minute. And here he says this interesting thing, don't do someone else's work even if you're really good at it. And again, what did that mean? Anyone remember the 3 ways in which you can be good at your work? Information, skills, and values. So here Krishna is talking about if you really know the information about some work and you're really good in the skills of it, but you don't have the values, don't do it. Don't go on someone else's path. Don't do someone else's work. Now, we know what it feels like to do something that's inauthentic. Have you ever been at a social gathering that you didn't want to be at? And you're like, that's so nice to see all of you here. Right? I mean, even an actor can't be in a pretense situation all day, every day. We cannot be day after day after day after day pretending to have values that we don't have. Now, what's really interesting is Krishna calling doing someone else's work, that your work becomes a bhayavaha. Bhaya means sphere, avaha means a vehicle. Your work becomes a vehicle of fear, both for you, the driver, and for everyone else who's on the road. If you think of different kinds of work being, you know, somebody has a boat, somebody has a plane, somebody has a bicycle, somebody has a car, and if you're trying to drive your bicycle in the sky, or you're trying to drive your boat on the road, your vehicle is going to become a vehicle of fear, both for yourself and everybody else. So let's look at this first on what appears to be just an individual level. It's fascinating that Krishna is emphasizing over and over and over and over and over again in the Bhagavad Gita to do your own work, to do the work that's according to your nature. And he's also emphasizing to do detached work, and he's also emphasizing to make your mind your friend. And all of those work together. So this, again, appears at first glance to be primarily about us as an individual, If we're doing our own work, we're going to feel enlivened. We're going to feel engladdened. Wow, I can't wait to do this. And when we're doing our own work, we don't want to stop. Oh my goodness, do I have to take prasadam? Do I have to go to bed? You know, we get into kind of a state of flow. If we're doing someone else's work, we feel depleted. We procrastinate. All the time we're doing the work, we're thinking about when is it going to be over, when could I do something else. When we're doing our own work, our mind is our friend. Our mind just flows with our work. Do you remember we talked about the prejudices people have about the field? About each of the 4 fields? So what I started noticing in myself is that if I do work in any of the 3 fields that are not mine, how my mind becomes my enemy. And my mind becomes my enemy in a very specific way. Like if I do work in the field of government, my mind will be going the whole time, why isn't someone else doing this? What's wrong with the leaders? Where are they? Why do I have to be doing this? The managers should be doing this. Why are they negligent in their duties? And if I'm doing field of resources work, I'm thinking, why am I making money? Why am I thinking about money? I don't want to think about money. That's dirty. Ugh, I don't like thinking about money. And if I'm doing work in the field of artistry, I'm thinking, does anybody care? Does anybody notice? Does it matter to anybody? Does anyone appreciate what I'm doing? That never happens when I'm doing my own work. I'm just flowing with it. And I can imagine that people who aren't naturally in the field of ideas, when they're doing ideas work, they're probably thinking something like, well, this is all useless. What am I doing some stupid stuff like this for?
Would you talk a little slower?
Oh, a little slower. Okay. How much slower should I be? Not that slow, just a little. Okay, I've got to remember I'm not in America. Okay. Although you all speak English here, I'm not right in the middle of Manhattan. That's what I love when I go to New York. I can just talk like I talk. Okay. So I'd imagine, thank you for correcting me, I would imagine that when people who are not naturally in ideas, work in ideas, that they're thinking, why am I doing something useless? Why can't I be doing something that's really helping people? Or why can't I be doing something that's actually providing wealth? Or why can't I be doing something that people will appreciate more? And in some way, we tend to be criticizing ourselves according to the prejudices we have about the fields that are not ours. And we're constantly battling with our mind. So if I'm doing someone else's work, I'm going to be battling physiologically. My body's going to feel tired. It's going to feel exhausted. It's not going to have the energy. I'm going to be battling with my mind. It's really going to struggle to be absorbed in what I'm doing at the moment. When I'm doing my own work, I'm going to have a natural detachment from the results of my work. Because I'm doing work that's basically an expression of myself. So I'm getting intrinsic satisfaction. Therefore, I'm not so concerned with happiness and distress, heat and cold, honor, dishonor, failure, success, because the work itself is satisfying. And I can naturally give the results to Krishna. If I'm doing someone else's work, the work is not an expression of myself. It's not intrinsically satisfying, and therefore the kind of things that I'm going to get attached to are how much am I being paid, what's the working conditions like, what are the other people like that I'm working with, maybe how much recognition am I getting. I'm going to be looking at those sort of things, and being detached from the results is going to be extremely difficult. Okay, I'm going to go on now to main dangers to society, but I'd like to say that even with these, like if you were to work with a group of people and they were all in this category, they're enlivened, their mind is their friend, and they're detached, would that affect you to be with a group of people like this? If you work with a group of people who are depleted, always fighting with their mind, and attached, would that affect you? So this isn't just what's happening with us internally, but how I'm internally enjoying or not what I work is also going to affect everyone around me. And think about a devotional community. If you go to a devotional community and 99% of the people are like this, you're going to have a very different experience than if you go to a devotional community where 99% of the people are like this. And I've been to communities where they have a very high turnover rate, where most of the devotees are transient. They push people into work that's not theirs, under the plea of surrender or something like that. And then the people they're miserable and they leave. They stay as long as they can do it, and then they leave. I'd like to ask you to just think about where this concept comes from, that to be surrendered one should do work that's not their nature. Is that in the scripture anywhere? Is surrender ever defined by you should do work that's not your nature? Is that ever the definition of surrender given anywhere?
Only in the connection to Guru, that sometimes when he gives an order that usually would not be our nature, but...
So she's saying that it may be in connection to Guru that they might give an order that's not our nature. Srila Prabhupada says that the duty of a guru is to... What do you think? Engage people according to their nature. So if there's a guru who's regularly giving orders to people against their nature, that guru is negligent in their duty. Because it is the duty of a guru to engage people according to their nature. Prabhupada says that over and over and over again. And I had someone just the other day say to me, well, Prabhupada said to do the needful. So I went and looked that up. And there's not one instance where Prabhupada used that phrase, which is, by the way, a very Indian phrase, in terms of do work that's not your nature. Never. There's not one single instance. Prabhupada used the term do the needful to fill out the details of a general instruction that he would give. He might say, I'd like the building finished by this date because that's when I'm going to visit, so you please do the needful. In other words, you figure out I'm not going to tell you all the details of it. But never did he use it to mean do whatever needs to be done, whether it's your nature or not. There's not one single instance of that.
Like practical engagement sometimes, especially in the beginning years. Especially in the beginning years, there was practical engagement like get down here, open a temple, or build a temple, or start a magazine.
But Srila Prabhupada always did that as far as possible in accord with people's nature, unless we're talking about a 1 or 2 day emergency. So this concept is just, it's nowhere in our scriptures and it's nowhere in our tradition. That to be surrendered means I should be willing to do something that's not according to my nature. Now, brief emergencies are something else.
Can you use the mic, please?
Mike.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu describes for the devotional service, Naham Vipro, Na Narapati, Naha Vaishya, Na Shudro, that I am just a Dasanudas, Gopi Bharatur Dasanudas. So that more that we are not having any of this varnas when we are performing any devotional service when it comes to.
Okay, well this we would get to on Monday when we talk about working above the shades of ego, when we talk about doing work as yajna. So that we don't actually identify, when we talk about how to work above the modes, which we call the shades of ego, that we don't identify with the work that we're doing. You've got a bus, you've got a boat, you've got a bicycle. You're not the bicycle, you're not the boat. But that's what you've got. So you don't say, I am a boat, I am a bicycle, I am a car. And everything should be done in service. But I actually do service unless I'm serving according to who I am. Like, I can't donate your car to the temple.
You can try.
I could try. You know, I can only give to Krishna myself. I can't give a false self to Krishna.
Right.
Even in our ordinary relationships, perhaps you've had a relationship with somebody who is pretending to be something that they're not. Is that sustainable? No. You know, after some time, you're like, wait a minute, I want a relationship with the actual person here, not with a facade. And I can't give to Krishna something that's not me. It's just not authentic. Also, if you think about the different fields as parts of the body, so if you're a muscle cell, you can only serve the body in the muscle. You can't serve the body in a bone. It won't work. You can't do any service. You're going to do a disservice. You know, if you're a stomach cell, you can't say, well, the lungs could use some help. Let me go in there. You know, it just won't work. What you have to offer and what you need will not be compatible.
Right.
And we see people who, you know, in the name of surrender, in the name of doing whatever's needed, end up in these categories in the long term. They're long-term physically depleted, they're long-term mentally exhausted from constantly fighting their mind, and they become more and more fearful and attached to their external situations. I don't want to lose my little room, I don't want to lose my little stipend, I don't want to lose my little this, that they become very attached. And then often when people come with problems, you know, I'm not enlivened by my sadhana, I'm like, what's really happening is this stuff. And if they fixed it and they were like this, then they'd find that things flowed very easily, which was a lot of the reason Prabhupada gave for wanting to establish varnashram. That then it was just hearing Prabhupada say the other day, then you become peaceful. You become peaceful and it's very easy to do devotional service. Any other comments on this before we go on to broad society? Yes.
Yeah, I was just trying to.
We don't have a
Mike.
We don't have a mic anymore. It's
We don't have a mic anymore.
batteries.
Then I'll have to remember to just repeat. Remind me, make sure I repeat. Otherwise I'll get a message from my friend in Croatia.
So in many places, Srila Prabhupada glorifies Harinam Sankirtan, like book distribution especially, and so everybody was doing it in the past, and so there was no question like, is this your field or not? But everybody was doing it, and it's also like very more glorified than other things. It seems to me in the books, and also like what he says in general, Srila Prabhupada. So yeah, how do we understand this? Because for example.
Okay, do you see number 6? So she's saying that everyone should go out on Harinam Sankirtan, everyone should go on book distribution. Do you see principle number 6?
Having celebrations of the sacred in our life.
Yes. So that talks about yajna. So everybody, we'll talk about this tomorrow, everybody should be doing yajna. As part of actually doing Dharma in your work, you need to be doing yajna.
So yajna is different from your regular work.
Yajna should, well, it's interesting. He says yajna should be different from your regular work. Everyone should take some time out from their regular work to do yajna. Kind of like if a person says, I'm working for my family, they may have a picture of their family on their desk. But if you're working for your family, you also need to spend some time with your family. You know, I've been in some countries, like in the GCC countries, where you have men who only see their family 1 month every 4 years. I mean, Prabhupada condemns that kind of thing. I was again hearing him tell this story the other day, how there was one man who left for work before his son woke up and came back at night after his son went to bed. And when his son was like 3, 4 years old, he saw his father and said, who is this man? So in a similar way, if I'm going to be working for Krishna, I also have to spend some time with Krishna, separate from my work. Now, ideally, by spending some time with Krishna separate from my work, all my work becomes yajna. That's Bhagavad Gita 4:24. Now, I'd like to ask you, so would a society function if everybody in the whole world just did Harinam Sankirtan all day long? Perhaps, if it was the beginning of Satya Yuga. So, as I said the other day, in the beginning of Satya Yuga, there was no varnas and no ashrams. Now, if you think of the fact that there was no ashrams and think about what that means practically, that's a little revolutionary in and of itself. Now, when Srila Prabhupada said he wanted to establish Varnashram Dharma, he obviously didn't feel that all 8 billion people in the world were just going to dance in the streets all day long. And then it would be hard to do book distribution because who would you distribute the books to? I guess you would just exchange them among each other. So if we're going to have people who are doing that full time, you're going to have some people doing that full time. But if everybody did that full time, who would take care of the cows? Who would take care of the deities? Who would clean the temple? Who would make the money to pay for the plumbing? Who would do the plumbing? You follow? Who would be teachers in the schools? So you obviously couldn't have a society where every single member of the society were doing that full time, unless you were on a situation on the earth where there was a tropical or subtropical climate all over the whole planet, and nobody had to do anything for a livelihood, and the earth just gave you fruit and grains, and the cows just automatically were pouring milk on the ground, and that kind of thing. And you didn't need to have a home because it was so nice outside that you didn't need to have a shelter. So if you want to stick around until the next Satya Yuga, you can experience that. It doesn't even last very long in Satya Yuga. But everybody should engage in Harinam Sankirtan Yagya. Is that all right?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Prabhu.
This is,
Mike is back.
Oh, Mike. We have a mic again. Thank you.
Just as a small comment on Nimai Nitai Das Prabhu, is that what comes to my mind is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his interactions with Mukunda and Raghunandan Thakur and Narahari Sarkar, which were family members of each other. They asked instructions from Lord Chaitanya, and they were all on the transcendental plane, pure devotees of the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave them all different instructions according to their nature.
Yes.
He said to Mukunda, you stay a physician, you stay as a doctor, but you don't cure only the body, but also the soul. And to Raghunandan Thakur, he says, you become a lifetime pujari. And to Narahari Sarkar, he says, you love to dance, so please join the Sankirtan party and dance. So they were all pure devotees, but the instructions were different according to their nature.
Very nice. Also, you can think about with Gopinath Pattanayaka, where after that whole incident where he was almost killed on the Changa, and he said, maybe I should just renounce everything, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, no. He said, you have a large family to maintain. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati has a long purport, whether you're a renunciate or a householder, you know, if you're doing things for Krishna, then you're not affected by your work. Krishna wants a full and prosperous society with all the parts of the society functioning together. It's something he wants. He's created this system. And it's definitely something that Srila Prabhupada wants us to do. I think that's beyond contention. Does anybody doubt that Srila Prabhupada wants us to do that? The biggest problem is that we haven't had any really clear idea of what it was he wanted us to do and how to do it. That's what we saw as the problem. But I don't think there's a question about it, that Prabhupada wouldn't say, oh yes, everybody should just go out on the Sankirtan party and we should forget about doing Varnashram. and forget about having temples. So there was a certain point in our movement, when there were only like 10 people in the movement. But even then, Prabhupada was very happy with those who had jobs. He was very happy that Satsrupa had a job and that Brahmananda had a job. And in 1975, we were neighbors with Gopal Krishna, then Prabhu. So he and his wife and 2-year-old son lived next door to us. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj had just quit being the GBC for India. In those days, there was one GBC for all of India, and he told Prabhupada, I'm not going to be GBC for India anymore. If you knew Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you'd understand this conversation that he had with Prabhupada. He said, I'm not going to be GBC for India anymore, Srila Prabhupada. I'm going to go to America and take out buses and preach to the Americans. And then Kurandar, who was running Spiritual Sky, which was one of the main financial bases for ISKCON, he left the movement. And so Prabhupada was left without 2 of his big leaders. And he wrote a letter and he said, Gopal Krishna is qualified either to be head of Spiritual Sky or to be GBC of India, but I don't want him to quit his job. And what was he doing? He was working in an advertising agency, and his clients were Pepsi Cola and Clairol hair dye. And the devotees in the temple were very critical of him. Oh, you're just in Maya, you're married with a kid and you have a job. And then we saw this letter from Prabhupada. He said, I'd rather he keep his job. Now, eventually Prabhupada did decide to make him GBC of India. With regret. He said, I don't want to do that. But, okay, I don't have anyone else. You'll become GBC of India. Okay, anything else on this before we go on?
Maybe it can be...
Mike.
Maybe it can also happen that someone is always in this consciousness, okay, we are in a precarious situation, like we need people to do certain things, and if we don't have them, then we have no one, then others have so much work, so we have to like stay in this rhythm that we have now, and we have to like everybody better stay in their lane and not like think too much about their individuality.
Ooh, that was an interesting statement.
That's just like in this survival mode, like maybe.
That sounds like fun.
No, it doesn't.
That sounds sustainable and attractive too. Join the Hare Krishna movement. Forget about your individuality and be in survival mode.
Yeah, but it can happen, right?
It definitely can happen. And it's fine if it happens for a day or two, but it's not fine if it happens for months and years. Now suppose instead we said join the Hare Krishna movement. You can learn how to work so that you'll be the best example of yourself. You'll be the best expression of yourself. You'll have the types of prosperity that truly enrich you, that you joyfully want to share with others, and you can feel that you're making a meaningful contribution to society, and that every moment is filling you with spiritual enlivenment, a thrill at every moment. So what would you prefer, that, or forget about your individuality and be in survival mode?
Yeah, the first one sounds better.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, okay. Yes. Mike running around.
We just had this seminar about Prabhupada Foundracharya.
Yes.
And there is this whole topic about cooperation.
Yes.
So, I mean, how do we cooperate? Because with this cooperation, there you can ask a lot of sacrifice, and you have to cooperate, Prabhu, you have to, so we get lost there.
So let's look at 8. One of the parts of 8 is cooperation between the fields. So a system, and we're hoping, Krishna willing, that here in Radhadesh, that we can make the community an example of not just 1 through 7, which are individual, but also 8 and 9, which are societal. So how we can show that within each field there's competition, and between the fields there's cooperation. There shouldn't be competition between one of these four fields and another. The competition should be just within the fields. And to cooperate also implies that I'm cooperating as myself. So if each of us are properly situated, then we're in a much better position to cooperate. Does that make sense?
We still have to see how it will work in practice.
Yes, well, that's the whole idea. That's what we're all here as revolutionaries trying to figure that out.
As a management perspective, I also participate in temple management in India. How I can find devotees for each job? And I have to find somebody who is in resource, somebody who is in government, somebody who is... I may not get that combination, permutation for the services which I have in my temple.
That's the fear, isn't it?
So how...
That's the fear, isn't it?
That's the fear. That's the...
Yeah, that's the overriding managerial fear. You know, we have hundreds of thousands of devotees now in our Hare Krishna movement.
In India we have a lot, but...
Oh, we even have a lot here in Europe. We have many, 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 many devotees. And we definitely have devotees in all four fields, and we definitely have devotees with a variety of talents. If we can have a system where people can see, oh, I can actually serve according to my nature. And not only can I serve according to my nature, but the systems in place to facilitate that all of these 9 principles are there, you're going to have a waiting list. Do we believe that Krishna has given us an ideal system?
Yes. Yeah.
Then if we were to put it into effect, we would have a waiting list. It wouldn't be a problem. You'd have more candidates for positions than you could even use. You'd be turning people away.
I think it will be futuristic, but I'm just saying transition.
Well, of course, there's a transitional period.
So during the transition period, I may have to assign somebody who is not...
But beware, then you're going to produce an atmosphere like this. That's what you're going to do. You're going to produce an atmosphere like this, which is then going to make it very difficult to fill those positions because people will look at it and say, I don't want that. I don't want to be part of that. I can see the gears turning there. It's actually visible. Okay, now we're going to look at the heaviest thing here. Because when Rukmini, Dr. Chiradata, and I were looking at this and trying to say, why did Krishna take all the hundreds of thousands of possible ways of earning a livelihood and put them into 4 categories? And then we looked at what I'm about to show you that goes far beyond this. And once we got this, we're like, oh my God, like 70% of the problems in society are due to this. So in my presentation here, I'm looking just very briefly. If you want to go deeper, I forget which chapter it is, it's 2 chapters in the book. We talk about why fence. And we have a chapter on why fence off the fields in general, and then we have a chapter why fence off the fields, specific mixtures. And for each of these, we give many more examples than I'm going to give now, and we give historical examples of each of these. So this is just a brief overview. So we're going to look at every possible crossing. This is crossing government and resources. So this means someone with the mentality of government working in resources, or someone with the mentality of resources doing work in government. Can someone tell me what is similar about these 2 fields?
Both are expensive.
Both are expensive, and both are?
No, both
You've
are
got a cheat sheet up there. Both are expensive and both are
dishonest.
diplomatic. We prefer diplomatic. Nope, nothing prejudicial here, okay? Yes, okay, they're both expansive, they're both diplomatic. Can you tell me a difference between these fields?
One is for making profits, another is for spending.
Yeah, one is for more distribution, one is more generous, and one has to be more profit-minded. Okay. So people with a mentality of resources working in government, they're going to tend to focus on the special needs of their industry. They're really going to struggle to be broad-minded enough to take care of the needs of all of the citizens in their domain. Because in their own work, they need a laser-like focus on what is their particular area. So they're going to be just focused on the cows or on wheat or something like that, or silk cloth or whatever they're dealing with. And it's going to be very difficult for them to think of the big picture. And in government, you can't get rid of problems by shifting it to someone else. People with a mentality of resources working in government may try to profit from government. Do we have this problem in the world? Yes? This is the one thing people in government should not do, and we talk tomorrow about cherishing your field. People in government should not be seeking to make a profit off of government. We have some people who are in a resource mentality, they go into government and they try to tweak the laws to favor their industry with the idea that then they'll go back into their industry with favorable laws. Resource-minded people working in government. In the United States, we have some privately run prisons. They're running the prisons like a business. Are they going to be interested in reforming the criminals? No, they actually want repeat customers. They're not going to be spending money on the education and reformation of the prisoners. All right, people with a mentality of government working in resources. They're going to put people over projects. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? Right? You may say, oh, that's wonderful. But in resources, if the project doesn't thrive, both the employees and the customers lose. You've got to put the project first. That's the unsentimental nature of resources. And government-minded people don't get that. Government-minded people in resources. Now, when I asked a group of Russians this, everybody knew the answer. What happened when the government took over the farms in the former Soviet Union? Disaster. What specifically happened? There was famine. Because the government people didn't have the profit motive. And so there was food rotting in the fields. Yes? Mike? I probably can't take too many questions going through this.
There's a saying, in relation to that, there's a saying that beggars when mounted ride their horse to the death. That's what happened in the Russian Revolution.
Interesting. But this was specifically, the government took over agriculture and they took over businesses. They were destroyed. The people had nothing to eat. Government-minded people in resources, then when they're going to talk about a fair price, they're going to think about social justice. Well, okay, these people who are poorer, they should have to pay less. We should make this facility for these people, and we should spend profits for social justice. And the business tends to fail. They don't have this, is it sustainable and is it regenerative mentality. I've seen this sometimes in our Hare Krishna movement, when government-minded people have a business in their community that they're running, and they want all the profits put into the temple, and the business fails. Okay, crossing government and ideas. What's similar about these two fields?
Both are more abstract.
They're both more abstract, yeah?
And
They both tend to look at systems. What's very different?
government is more sentimental, and these people are, they are not sentimental.
Yes, one is more serving people directly, one is more unsentimental. Other differences?
more impractical. This government is more practical.
More practical,
And they are
and ideas dealing more with theory. What else?
It's more introspective, the idea.
Yeah. Huh? Any other differences?
They're more on thoughts and not less on execution.
Yes. Some others? You got your cheat sheet up there, folks. Use it. It's what I have it up there for. Satisfaction and expansion. One is a satisfied field, one is an expansion field, one is an honest field, one is a diplomatic field. Okay, people with the mentality of ideas going into government. Ideas people tend to be very forgiving. They really have a hard time punishing criminals. They tend to be soft on crime. We have this in the Bhagavatam with Vena, I'm thinking about, where he was installed. You know, okay, we put somebody in charge of the government, we'll go back to our hermitages and just meditate. Right? People with a mentality of ideas in government, they're too detached. In government, you have to have some mood of like, rah, rah, our country. You know, there has to be some of this sort of loyalty to your group in order to inspire people to pay their taxes and so forth. And ideas people are like, your group? Your country? What's that all about? That's silly. You know, they're just not going to be able to engender that kind of mood, that sort of patriotism. Ideas mentality people in government. Well, ideas people often like to research and then research some more and then maybe research some more and maybe research some more. And there's a decision that needs to be made for the benefit of the people today. And they're going to take 20 years researching and writing papers, and meanwhile the people don't get the decision that they need. Government-minded people working in ideas. They can politicize knowledge. Do you want to read a history book written by a politician? Now you'll see with all the three fields, if they work in ideas, they'll skew knowledge in some way. Government-minded people will politicize knowledge, resource people will try to make a profit out of knowledge, artistry people will sensualize knowledge. And in all of those cases, people will lose faith in the objectivity of what comes out of the field of ideas. Has that happened in modern society? You can't trust it. You can't trust what the scientists and the doctors and the philosophers say because you don't know if it's unbiased and objective. Government mentality people in ideas. Government is naturally more hierarchical than ideas if you think about the military. Whereas in ideas, it is much more sort of a free flow without that much concern about status. This is not understood well outside of the field of ideas. I mean, when I got my PhD, I remember thanking the head of my dissertation committee, Dr. Fenwick English, and I said, Dr. English, thank you so much for all of your help. And he looked at me and he said, no. He said, now that you have a PhD, I'm not Dr. English anymore, I'm Fenwick. He was 20 years older than me, and he was my professor, and he was the head of but once I was in that place, we were equals. And I see when I work with scholars and like that, there's no concept of a hierarchy. And again, this is not well understood. And if government-minded people work in ideas, they may try to impose a more hierarchical structure that impedes the free flow of knowledge. Now here we have the opposite situation to ideas in government. Government-minded people in ideas may try to bring this sort of, our team, our group, into ideas. And that creates sectarianism. You've got to be for our group and our thing. And also government-minded people, they may be really uncomfortable with just this extreme detachment in the field of ideas. A lot of people in the field of ideas just eschew credit for anything. And it's just not going to be a comfortable place for government-minded people. They're going to lose a lot of their enthusiasm. Crossing ideas and resources. What's similar about these two fields? They're both unsentimental fields. Yes. What's different?
They are honest, they are
Honest and diplomatic, expansive and satisfied. This particular crossing fascinates me. Absolutely fascinates me. You really see the difference in Dharma when you look at this crossing. So people with the with ideas, mentality, working in resources are going to feel that it's unethical to make a profit. They're going to, and I know one devotee who's running a business, and she told me, I hate running a business. I'm doing this because I can't figure out any other way to support myself and my daughter, but I hate making money. I feel contaminated every time I make money. I just want to give everything away. Ideas, people, and resources, they're not expansive. They'll have their own little garden, but they don't want to have an agribusiness. They'll have one little cow, you know, they don't want to feed the community. They just won't be able to have that expansive energy. Resources-minded people in ideas, they may try to skew knowledge for profit. Like, do you trust research on pharmaceuticals done by the pharmaceutical companies? No. And then again, it gets people to not trust what comes out of the field of ideas. Now, at least in America, we have this saying, a pie in the sky. It means something imaginary or irrelevant. So people with a resource mentality are going to see the theoretical work of the field of ideas as pies in the sky. And they're going to feel it's unethical to spend money and human time on theoretical research. If it's not doing anything practical, it's not making any money, I'm sorry, we can't facilitate this. It's unethical. And I just see this opposite view of what is ethical. And so if resource people work in ideas, they'll probably neglect most of the theoretical work. They'll just think that I can't put time and effort and money into this. Crossing ideas and artistry. What's similar about these fields?
both are satisfied.
Both are satisfied and both are honest. Right? But remember how different the satisfaction and honesty is? It's a very different kind of satisfaction. Remember, artistry people, they're satisfied if they have like a comfortable home, good food, nice clothes, loving partner. Their customers and clients are appreciative. They can develop the quality of their craft. And in ideas, they're satisfied with mental, intellectual work. And they don't even so much take notice of the external world. And then the honesty in artistry is about what?
About the cost and
The cost and what's actually wrong with your car. And the honesty in ideas is, hey, this is what you have to hear.
straightforward.
Straightforward truth, whether you like it or not. Artistry people in ideas. So here we have our concrete, abstract problem. You have the most concrete people trying to work in the most abstract field. They often just can't grasp subtlety and nuance and various perspectives that are needed for the field of ideas. And you see this when people, you'll talk about something philosophical and someone will say, well, Prabhupada said this. And you say, well, yeah, he said that over there, but over here he said this. And no, but here he says this. But what about what he said? No, here he says this. And that's necessary in artistry because you have to make a table. And you can't say, well, it could be a table with 3 legs or 2 legs or half a leg or 1 leg over here and 1 leg over there. That's not the kind of work you have to do in artistry, but when you bring that to ideas, it doesn't work. And they may sensualize knowledge. So again, the field of artistry is what's bringing all the sensual pleasures to society, and that's required. But ideas are providing the vision for society. Remember we talked about artistry metaphorically is like providing the salt and spices for the food of life. But if you get salt and spices in the eyes of the social body, you're going to have a disaster. Artistry people working in ideas, they may see the work of ideas as just like recreation, like crossword puzzles. Like, it may be really hard for them to grasp, okay, well, why is this important? Why do we really have to look at this? And artistry people and ideas are going to, their natural desire is to please a customer and a client. And so they may neglect to find research that's going to bring out unpleasant truth. Or they may distort truth to please people. And they may be very subject to being corrupted. Because if someone says, oh, I'll be happy with you if you do this, and I'll offer you some nice perks and a nice place to stay, they may choose that over objective truth. The great freedom that's necessary in the field of ideas may feel very uncomfortable to people in artistry who are much more desirous of security. Now, ideas people working in artistry, and this is a problem for both ideas people working in artistry and government people working in artistry, they're very independent. They don't want to be pleasing customers and clients, and they will often become then insubordinate. They may miss deadlines, they may procrastinate, they just may be very difficult if they're put into that kind of situation. They're going to feel very confined without the freedom that's their natural environment. It just won't be able to function. Some ideas people working in artistry may just think they're too detached, and it's like, why do you have to make the world beautiful? So one of my friends is definitely an ideas person who can't figure out how to make money as an ideas person. And so he's decided he wants to work as an electrician. And I told him, you're in the wrong field. And so one time he was talking to me and he said, you know, Urmila, I think you're right that I'm in the wrong field. He said, the other electricians, they make the wires in the box look beautiful. And I think, this is just so stupid. Like, who cares? So ideas-minded people working in artistry may dry up the field. They're too detached, and they may not actually provide the pleasures that's necessary for society. Or they may get pulled into the sensory nature of artistry. Now, this is particularly a problem for the intellectuals who ought to be working in the field of ideas. Now, remember, not all jobs in the field of ideas are intellectual work. But intellectuals who are in the field of ideas, who end up working in artistry, may become, they may use their intellectualism for sensual purposes. So you can think of a food scientist. You know, food scientists, they study what makes people eat more. Okay, if we have the right mix of sugar, salt, fat, and crunch, then people will keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating. And so they'll design food, artificial food, with this mixture so that people just overeat all this garbage food. And so they're using their intellectual capability when they put it into artistry. They're using it in a sensual way, and everything becomes distorted. Or you can think of people who are using psychology to advertise something. They're playing on, they're using their knowledge of psychology instead of to guide people and help people. They're using it to manipulate people to get things that they don't need and may even be harmful for them.
Honest. And ideas people are honest.
But they're working in artistry. Whenever you bring your natural Dharma into someone else's field, you become unethical. You harm society. Your work becomes a what? A bhayavaha. Your work becomes a vehicle of fear. Okay, crossing government and artistry. In what ways are these two fields similar?
Warm heart.
Yes, warm heart. These are people, those who help people directly. They're serving people directly. What are the differences?
These people are satisfied, these people are
You've got a satisfied and expansive thing going on here. What else?
Truthful and diplomatic.
Truthful and diplomatic. What else?
Caring and exploitative. Concrete.
Excuse me?
No, that's
Caring is the
both
government.
are.
Is caring.
You're telling me that a field is intrinsically exploitive?
No. It's caring.
Okay, so what's the differences between these two fields?
Abstract and concrete.
Huh? Abstract and concrete. You have an abstract, so you have an expansive, satisfied, an honest, diplomatic. You have an abstract and concrete difference. And also in the way they're serving people. In artistry, you serve people as an assistant. And in government, you serve people as a parent, which is a little different. Right? We met that family. Right? So if your child says to you, I want ice cream, and you say, first you have to eat your broccoli, that's a parent. If you're a servant and your master says, I want ice cream, you bring them ice cream. You understand? Yeah. Okay. Artistry mentality people in government. Here we have our concrete abstract problem. So there's a famous book called The Fog of War. That you can have a plan for a battle, but when the battle actually starts, you have a fog of war. You don't know what's going on. And you have to make split-second decisions, split-second life or death decisions with a paucity of information. Artistry people are really going to struggle with that. They want a concrete, how do I build the table? How do I place the order? They're really not going to be able to function in the fog of war. Artistry-minded people in government, here you have the expansive, satisfied problem. Artistry people want to take care of people, but they don't want to take care of a lot of people in some very complicated way. And they're going to look at that and say, that's a bunch of politics. And they're going to have difficulty doing the work. Artistry-minded people in government are going to tend to turn government into a bureaucracy. Now, you want some bureaucrats in government, as like the secretaries and the assistants, but you want the people actually doing government work to be able to work not just on rules, but on principles, and to be able to adapt things for the changing needs of people and society. And artistry-minded people, being more concrete, are really going to struggle with doing that. Okay, here you have the risk-taking factor, that the government people are risk-takers. We talked about the firefighter as epitomizing the person in government. Everyone else is running out of the fire, they're running into the fire. Somebody's shooting people in a warehouse, they're running into it, everyone else is running out. Artistry people are into security. We had an incident in America a year or two ago where there was a shooting in a school. Maybe some of you read about this, and some of the police officers didn't go inside, or some of the security people didn't go inside to save the kids. And when they said, why were you just standing around in the parking lot when you're supposed to be the security guys? They said, well, people were shooting in there. Government people working in artistry. Do you want a high risk taker doing your electrical wiring? And here you have the same problem as ideas-minded people working in artistry. They're really going to have a hard time working for customers and clients. I mean, even resource people are going to struggle with that, but ideas and government people, it's going to be almost intolerable. And again, they're going to tend to be insubordinate, procrastinating, late with deadlines. And government people, they're inspired. They want to work for justice and morals and ethics. And they're the most constricted in artistry. It's where they have the least power to do that. And so government-minded people working in artistry can become vigilantes or vigilantes, someone who takes the law into their own hands. Like they're not a police officer, they're not military, but they go around trying to give people justice. Or agitators. I'm personally convinced that a lot of people who make a lot of noise on the internet or in our societies, justice, morals, ethics, justice, morals, it's because they don't have a job in the field of government. And they probably have a job in the field of artistry where they're just so frustrated that how can I create justice and fairness in society? And so they end up creating a huge disturbance in society like that. Crossing resources and artistry. So what's similar about these two fields?
Concrete.
Well, resources is more abstract, but they both deal with practical things in life. Okay. Differences?
One is truthful, another is diplomatic.
We have the truthful diplomatic and we have the
Sensible, non-sensible, non-sentimental.
not sentimental. Be very careful. Thank you.
Assistant and boss.
Well, no, because resources isn't like thinking of taking care of people the way government is. The resources is focused on taking care of the business, and by taking care of the business, people get served. If taking care of the people directly is government, I'm going to directly take care of people. In business, it's indirect. I'm going to have a thriving business. If I have a thriving business, then the employees all also thrive and the customers also thrive. But I'm not. That's why it seems unsentimental. And that's an important difference. And then we have the satisfied and expansive. Okay, when resources people try to do artistry work, they destroy the craft. They're going to be interested in being expedient and making a profit. They're going to create factories. They're going to automate. They're not interested in the craft. And then they're going to drive the prices lower so the people who are doing the craft can't compete anymore. I saw this at a project done by devotees in India where they wanted to build it fast and cheap. So instead of hiring stone carvers, what they did was they're mixing powdered stone and fiberglass, pouring it into molds to look like carved stone, and having their artistry people do that instead of carving the stone. I said, why are you doing this? Oh, it's faster and it's cheaper. Now, this was after they were bragging to me on and on and on about how varnashrami they were and how they had restored the native plants to the area and how they were going to have some cows. And I said, you know, varnashram is about taking care of all the varnas. I said, you're destroying the field of artistry here. You're destroying the craft. You're destroying people's pride in there. Are you going to feel any pride pouring, fiberglass and powdered stone into a mold? Is that going to give you any pride? Versus actually carving the stone?
Or you can 3D print.
Yeah. You're not going to walk away with anything. You're not going to walk away with any kind of satisfaction. Think about plastic replacing metal and glass. Constantly changing fashions. Right? Fashions that become obsolete after 2 months with cheap fabric rather than hand-spun, hand-woven, hand-dyed. Does this sound like something Prabhupada talked about? You know? Right? Having media and entertainment instead of being emotionally inspiring, uplifting, and actually filling you with some kind of real pleasure, let's just throw in a bunch of sex and violence to make money. Instead of having athletic competitions where you're really going for your best, let's just, have people take drugs so they can win. It's just polluting the whole field of artistry. Artistry people and resources, they don't want to be expansive. Right? If they're potters, they're happy to have a little pottery shop, but they don't want to have like a franchise. They don't want to give pots to the world. They don't want to feed the world. They just want to share their little craft in a little way so they can have a comfortable life and please people. And they're not going to be able to take care of the world. Some artistry people are going to struggle with the idea of sustainable, regenerative wealth. And they're going to struggle with the idea of taking care of the land and the animals. And so we're going to have a problem with pollution. You know, they're thinking too small. And they're not being able to think about actually how are we going to keep things sustainable and regenerative. And it's definitely one of the main sources of pollution and industry in the modern world. So I hope we've seen that everybody's beautiful in their own place. And as soon as you put people in the wrong place, you have a problem. Again, I've just touched the surface here. So in the book, we have copious examples from history of each of these crossings. We also have many, many empiric references from scholars studying this, as well as many references from the Shastras. So I'm just touching on the concept that we can understand this. So if we want to look at why is the world a mess? One reason, people are working in the wrong field. Another reason, which we'll look at tomorrow, people are in the right field, but they've never been taught the Dharma. So they're not cherishing their field. And of course, another reason is they're in the modes of nature. They're not engaging enough in yajna. So these are basically the three reasons why the world is a mess. All right, so we have some time now, because I know that people wanted to have discussions and questions. We have some time now for any discussions and questions on any of the things we've talked about the last 2 days. Yes?
I just wanted to ask how to build that risk appetite. Sometimes you change your fields.
A risk appetite? In what context? What do you want a risk appetite for?
In changing the fields or within the fields also. Sometimes it's
Okay,
happening.
so what I think I'm hearing from you is if you realize, gosh, I'm in the wrong place, how do you get the courage to change? Is that what you're saying? Well, we human beings tend to react more, unfortunately, to pain than pleasure. It's a really sad thing. Like we're more eager to hold on to 50 euros than to try to get 100. So I think if we can understand how much we're suffering by being in the wrong place, how much it's impeding our spiritual life, how it's hurting those people around us, that can give us some impetus. And maybe we can also have some impetus from the carrot, that I'll be such a happier person. I remember talking to one devotee who all his life was told that he was an artist and was always pushed to work in the field of artistry. And he said, but I'm not in the field of artistry, I'm in the field of resources. And he was already like 36 years old and he already had, wife and kids. And it was really interesting. What he did for a living was paint houses. I said, what do you want to do? He said, this is exactly what I want to do. No, it was government. He said, I'm actually in government. He said, I want to be an urban planner. And we knew for that he was going to have to go to school. He was going to have to get certified. It was going to be a long road. It wasn't going to be, and I'm going to be able to change my career in 1 week. And in the meantime, he was going to have to financially provide for his family. But once he saw this and he was like, oh my God, I'm really messing up my life and everyone else's life by not being who I am. Then he got the courage and he said, I'm going to make this change. I remember many years ago, my husband always wanted to have his own business and he tried 3 times and failed. And then he got some excellent advice from one temple president who said, look, just get a job. While you have the job, start your business on the side. Once your business actually gets going, then drop your job. Now, he did have 2 weeks where he was working 16 hours a day, 8 hours at the job and 8 hours at the business. But he was able to then drop the job and have the kind of business that he wanted. So that took a while. I mean, in his case, it took about 6 months. But it was something that he had to kind of, yes. Now, ideally, We have a society for our young people where this doesn't have to happen, where we can figure out people's nature when they're teenagers, and so they can get into the right place from the beginning. But for many of us, you know, I meet people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and people say to me, when is it too late? I say, if you're 70, forget it. And just, you know, just chant Hare Krishna, it's over, forget it. Don't even worry about it anymore. You know, but if you still have any years of work left ahead of you, it's really worth it. And this is something that Krishna wants. And my co-author and I really struggled because we wrote this book for the people in general, and we wanted even people who didn't believe in a personal God to be able to read it and not just throw it in the trash can immediately. You know, so we were struggling with this. How do we present it that there's a controller who loves us and who wants the best for us and who's going to help us when we do what he wants us to do? So anytime my desire is in sync with that of Krishna, like, duh, Krishna will help you. So if Krishna wants us to be in the right place, which very clearly he does, and if he wants society functioning like that, if we move in that direction, he will help us. We'll get divine help. I mean, Krishna fulfills everyone's desire. You know, if you want to be a criminal, he'll also give you intelligence how to do that, but not the same. As if okay, Krishna, I want to do what you're teaching. I want to follow your plan. I want to follow your template for society. He'll help you so you can get some courage. When I was in Brazil, I was talking to this one woman who was, she came to me and she said, how do I deal with difficult people in my life? And then she was talking to me, she said, you know, my nature is in the field of government. And I said, well, what are you doing? She said, well, I used to help management in the temple, but I'm not doing that anymore. I said, okay, what are you doing for your livelihood? She said, I'm a banker. I said, well, that's in resources. I said, so you're not doing any government work in the world, and you're not doing any government work in ISKCON. I said, you're frustrated. And so you're burning people out. And that's why you've got all these difficult people in your life. And she's like, oh. And then she said, well, I don't know if I have the courage to move from resources to government. I said, then what kind of a government person are you? You don't have any courage. I said, you're telling me in your field of government and you're a coward? And she's like, oh, yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Mataji, you said that if the resource person is into artistry, he will do all automation. So whatever factories or across the globe which are there, all are example of the same? Because they are going to be, the business people are going to be expensive and they are going to...
Or they're resource people who are not cherishing their field. Because if you're cherishing the field of resources, one of the things that you're going to do is you're going to have respect for the other fields. You're going to have respect for the craft of the artisans. And you're going to make sure you have it. And we see people who do this. There are many businesses in the world who really do respect the artisans. And they'll advertise like that.
But then there are always, like if you go age-wise, previously when the car was manufactured, it was manufactured by one person, the whole car. And then there was some Vaishya who came and he says, I want to scale it up. And he broke down the process and he scaled it up. So it's always going to happen. It's always
Therefore,
art
one of the principles is checks and balances. So first of all, people have to be trained in their Dharma. So if people have a mentality of a field, they have to be trained in the Dharma of their field. And part of the Dharma is you respect the integrity of your field. And part of the Dharma is you respect the integrity of each of the other fields. You don't compete with the other fields, you cooperate with them. You find a way to respect them, not exploit them. There's always a tendency in this world for people who have more something, more wealth, more power, more intelligence, more status, to exploit the people without it. That's a general tendency for males to exploit females, for higher status people to exploit lower status people, for more intelligent people to exploit lesser intelligent people. That's always the tendency. But one has to be trained to do the opposite, to protect, to facilitate. And people have to be trained. That's again, why did Prabhupada say we have to teach Varnashram Dharma? If the four fields always exist and people with the four temperaments always exist, what is there to teach? It's already there. But you've got to teach people how to do it in a way that's daivi, not asuric, that's not exploitive, that actually takes care of people, that cherishes people. You can make the same example with cows. So, you know, if you're running a dairy farm and you think, well, I'm just going to go for expediency and profit, so let me kill all the male calves and let me just milk all the cows with machines and let me kill the female cows once they get to be 5 years old. So yeah, you'll make more money faster, but then you're damaging your field, you're polluting your field.
No, that is
But the
ethical.
problem is more when we're talking about here, when resources people actually through artistry work.
Yes, that is where my question is.
So there's a difference between resource people employing artistry people, which is their natural position, in which case they should employ them with respect for the field of artistry, or resource people doing artistry work. If resource people try to do artistry work, they'll want to automate it. They'll want to get rid of the craft. I mean, look, there's obvious immediate advantages to automating everything, like replaceable parts.
Well, it's like I am a Vaishya, he is my competition, he's also
Can we
there.
get rid of the Sanskrit?
Huh?
Can we get rid of the Sanskrit?
Resources.
Get rid of the Sanskrit for me, please. I'm begging.
sorry.
you. Get rid of the
I am a
Sanskrit.
resource person, he is also a resource person.
You know why I want you to get rid of the Sanskrit, right?
No,
You don't? You don't know why.
no.
Do you know how many people I've spoken to from India that I've taught this to, and they walk up to me and they say, I'm in artistry? Would that happen with the Sanskrit, my dear sir?
I'm a Shudra.
Would they say it with that enthusiasm when their face lit up like 1,000 suns dancing down the street? Please, for at least 2 weeks, get rid of the Sanskrit.
Got it.
Okay? We also have problems. There's a whole host of problems we have, and it's also with the field of ideas, what we think the field of ideas is. And someone will say, oh, this person comes to Mangal Artik every day, they must be in the field of ideas. We really need to just, please, put that aside for
Got
right
it.
now. I'm just begging you.
Okay, there are certain pictures about those.
Yes,
That's why I keep-
many of which are wrong. And if we use those terms, you're just going to bring all those pictures in.
Got
And
it.
I'm going to be trying to climb a vertical glass wall here. It's not going to work. Okay, so yes, you work in the field of resources, and yes.
So, I'm a person who is into resources.
Yes,
Okay, I am also making car. He's also making car.
yes,
Okay, I am also deploying initially some artists
Yes.
in my job, and then I'm deploying 100 artists.
yes,
He is deploying 50 artists, and he has done with others with automation. Now he has
Yes.
become more competitive. Now, for me to be competitive, only way
yes,
to is
but if
to
you're not allowed by Dharma to do that, if it's not an option, it's just not an option. You're trained in your Dharma, you're just not going to do that. Just like we read about, you know, those in the field of
If I
government.
don't do that, then I will lose my business.
Well, he can't do that either.
No, but he will do it. He will
No,
not.
but then you've got checks and balances in the society. So, you have checks and balances. We have maintaining societal balance, cooperation between the fields, and competition within the fields. And we're going to talk about this tomorrow. Checks and balances. The government is going to make sure you can't do that. The ideas people are going to make sure the government people make sure you can't do that. The ideas people are going to say to the government, you make sure the resource people treat the artistry people properly. And then the government people are going to do that because they're going to respect the ideas people. Does Prabhupada talk about this? Yes? No? Yes? This is, what you're looking at is the interplay between the fields. So yes, we can't expect, human nature being what it is, we can't expect that everyone's going to be in the right field and everyone's going to follow the Dharma, so there has to be checks and balances. And the fields check and balance each other. Resources is also a check and balance. Resources decides where they want to spend money, where they want to send materials. And they can have a check and balance on government and ideas with that. Artistry have a check and balance by deciding, well, first of all, they're the greater numbers, they can vote with their feet, but also they provide a check and balance by deciding what they want to translate into theater and music and art. So the people in government may say, we want this, and the people in artistry are going, nah, we're not going to translate that into art. That happened in the United States, by the way. There were big court cases where people in the field of artistry said, sorry, we're not putting that in our art. We don't care what the law says. And the courts sided with them and said they have the right of free expression in their art. So each of the fields has a check and balance on the other. Because otherwise, yes, as conditioned souls, our tendency is to be exploitive. Our tendency is to be pulled into the gunas. Now, if you also have a society where you have number 6, where yajna is prevalent in the society, then you're going to help pulling people above the gunas. Right now in our modern society, people are pulled into tamas and with a little bit of rajas. And we want to pull people above sattva. We want to pull people into bhakti, which then decreases this exploitive mentality. Will it be perfect? No, it won't be perfect. After all, it's Kali Yuga and we are conditioned souls. Can it be really nice? Yes. Prabhupada said if we do these things, it can be as nice as former ages. Am I being too idealistic? I don't know, maybe, but if so, then I'm following the very idealistic person sitting on the Vyasa side over there. So you can argue with him about it. Because I'd like to feel that I don't know, I don't have quite the idealistic naivete I had when I joined the Hare Krishna movement when I was 18. And I thought that if I just gave out enough back to Godheads in O'Hare Airport, that the whole world would change in a week. So I don't quite think like that anymore in my old age, but I haven't lost my conviction that the Supreme Lord and his representative are teaching us something, that if we have all the bits together, it will work. Now, let's say you can't get all the bits together. Let's say we can't pull the societal parts together in 8 and 9. Let's say you can only do 1 through 7, which is on an individual level. Then yes, you're going to have these kind of problems. That you're going to try yourself to be following the principles of career dharma in a society that doesn't support it. Is that more difficult? Duh, it's more difficult. It's something like, here in Belgium, everything's closed for Christmas, but not for Janmashtami. It's just, we don't have a society that's supportive. You go to the Muslim countries and they announce the prayer times 5 times a day. I've never been in a place where they announce the Gayatri times 3 times a day. That would be nice. Now I know in Alachua, Florida, because there's so many devotees, that all the supermarkets know when Ekadasi is. And the day before Ekadasi, they put up signs everywhere, like by the potatoes and stuff. Stock up for Ekadasi. Seriously. Huh? Yeah, in the regular grocery stores. Well, because there's so many devotees. They're catering to that population. So, we don't have that kind of a supportive environment, but maybe someday we will. That's what we're being asked to do. Is it a big job? Well, yeah. But we can start with ourselves as individuals, and maybe, we can start with some ideal communities. So New Govardhan in Australia is interested in becoming one of those communities, and I've heard that maybe Radhadesh in Belgium is interested in becoming. I've heard a rumor to that effect, which is why I took an overnight flight from Brazil. So, maybe if we can show a model. Now, I've already talked to some people involved in different governments who are very interested. I've talked to several people in the government of Nepal who are very interested. And the first thing they said is, do you have a model? So hopefully, also in Suriname. I spoke to some people high up in the government of Suriname and high up in the government of Nepal who were very interested and said, we'd really like to look at this as a template for our government. Do you have a model? So maybe we'll have a society where the ideas people guide the government people to tell you, you can't do this to the craftspersons. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to automate the craft just to make more money quickly.
Automation, I don't think it will ever be stopped, because computers came, it was one level of, now AI is going to come, but people will be still needed to work on improving those automation, building the next level of automation. So the next level of craft might be needed.
How exactly it will happen, I don't know, Prabhu. I just know we're supposed to be the instruments to see it happen. The details I don't know. I'm a very tiny living entity.
Otherwise, innovation will be.
I'm not invited to the commanders' meeting of the Panchatattva, with Lord Nityananda, Lord Chaitanya. I'm not invited there. I'm just a little foot soldier. Yes.
Hare Krishna. I understood that a reason a person engaged in their own field may find not complete satisfaction due to not performing enough yagya. So which varieties of yagya are there, and is there a specific yagyas for a specific fields, or everyone has the same kind of yagya?
Well, this is Mahaprabhu's movement. Everyone is supposed to do Sankirtan yagya. Of course, I don't think we're going to destroy all the religions of the world, but hopefully all the religions will find their own form of Harinam Kirtan. This is something Prabhupada said a lot, chant the name of God in your religion. So hopefully we can bring this Harinam Kirtan Yagya to the world within the scope of the different religions of the world. And almost every religion has some kind of yagya in relationship to food, to encourage people in that, to encourage people in prayer. Again, according to their particular faith and their particular tradition. But to have some means of connecting your eating with God, to call on the holy name of the Lord, so that can be for everybody. Yes, Bishop.
Yesterday you mentioned, let me see, I had written basically something with somebody else. You asked them to remind you today to mention this point. You were talking about.
Oh yes,
yeah,
how
bhakti,
each of the fields are favorable for bhakti.
Yes, and we
Thank you.
Last
Thank you.
two.
I had missed two, and I'm going to blame that on being sleep deprived from my overnight flight. So, we know that the field of artistry is very close to bhakti because of what? The service mood. This mood that my pleasure is through pleasing others, which is really the heart of bhakti. My pleasure is through pleasing God. My pleasure is through pleasing Guru. And this is the heart of the field of artistry. And then in the field of resources, they're dealing with Bhumi Devi. They're dealing with the wife of God. They're dealing with Lakshmi Devi. They're dealing with the wife of God. They're directly serving Srimati Radharani in her different forms. In the field of government, they're acting as the arms of the Lord. Krishna often appears in this field, and Krishna is the maintainer and the caregiver of everyone in society. Krishna is the supreme father and the supreme mother of the society. And so people in the field of government are assisting the Lord with that, to making sure that all the living entities are taken care of and protected on both a material and a spiritual level. And those in ideas, of course, are connected because a lot of their work is directly with studying philosophy or studying scripture or worshiping the Lord and giving guidance to others, so they tend to have that facility. And of course, then each of the fields has something that causes things to be difficult. So that's also true.
Which are the causes of difficulty for each field?
Well, in ideas, what do you think it is? It's hard to maintain yourself. Also a sense of pride. In government, what do you think it is? Too much dominance, yeah? In resources, what would be the problem? Greed, too much wealth, attachment to wealth. And in artistry, what would be the problem? Too much comfort. So each of them has its Achilles heel, and each of them has its benefit. You know, when Arjuna is thinking, well, I should change to another field, and then Krishna says, all work has some fault. Like there's always smoke and fire, all work has some fault. So don't give up the work that's born of your own nature just because it has some fault. So, and all work has some natural, easy way of connecting with Krishna. That just some way that's just part of that work that makes it very, very easy to connect. If it's your work. If it's your work. If it's not your work, you won't be able to access it. You know, if you're doing work that's not yours, you won't be able to access your natural connection with Krishna, nor will you be able to access that work's natural connection with Krishna, because it won't resonate with you. And then you'll have this dichotomy, you'll have this dualism in your life. That, well, here's my spiritual life and here's my work. All right, so tomorrow we're going to go over a summary of these 9 principles, which I have taught in Radhadesh before. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.